What's the most disturbing thing you know happened in real life that sounds like a horror movie? Kelly Margaret said, I had older friends that rode four-wheelers to take care of their pet livestock. One day they noticed the horse was choking, so they went to help the horse. The horse and donkey both had rabies and attacked, literally biting through bones. My friends both died horrible deaths, one after a couple of days hospitalized, the other after weeks. I still get nauseous when it crosses my mind, and it has been years. Junipotamus said, Ronald Gene Simmons made his kids dig a big hole on his property. Then, as they got off the school bus for Christmas break, he killed them one by one and buried them in the big hole. 2 days later, when his adult children arrived, he killed them and their children. One of these babies was also his child, because he molested his daughter. He threw the adult children in the hole and the babies in the trunk of an old car. The next day, he went on a shooting rampage in the next town over and killed 2 more people. After he went to death row, the townsfolk burned his house to the ground. He died by capital punishment. Happened in the late 80s in my hometown. Clownfish Soup said, here's an interesting story for you then. This dude was the town bully. Yes, he bullied everyone in town and got away with it, and everyone hated him. One day the townsfolk had had enough of him and met with the sheriff about it. He said you folks should start a neighborhood watch. Then he drove out of town to run an errand or something. The bully stepped outside of a store where he was threatening the store owner with a rifle and was promptly shot and killed by someone despite the 50 witnesses, none of whom called an ambulance. Nobody saw anything. The murder was never solved. Cough cough. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Ken_MC Elroy. The Sad Truth said, there's this street camera footage of an older woman presumably being dropped off in front of her house. She gets out the car and starts walking towards her house. As she's right near the doorstep, a huge block of hardened snow slides off her roof and falls directly on her head, knocking her to the ground. The guy who dropped her off, Coldverbin, her son, which makes this even more disturbing, hops out the car and rushes to check on her. Turns out the snow completely crushed her skull. Seemed like some stuff straight out of Final Destination. 1 minute just fine, the next minute instant death. Makes you realize just how fast somebody can be taken away. Edit. Found the link of the video https://www.google.com/am/w-w-w.thesin.co.uk/news/7802225/woman-killed-giant-icycle-fall-roof-luxury-apartment-block/amp/. There's a more graphic one somewhere the first time I saw it, but I'd prefer not to revisit that. Prombles said, oh my word, this is so similar to a small town in my county. The sheriff department was sent to do a wellness check on an old woman after the son that lived out of town had kept being told by his step-half-brother, I can't remember which, for quite some time that she was sleeping, each time he called to talk to her. Turns out she had been dead for something like 2 years, and the son that lived with her left her in her easy chair, covered her with a blanket, and hung air fresheners off of her. According to reports, he assured the officer he and his mother were fine, but they insisted on seeing the mother, which he allowed, and that's when they found her in the recliner. He had been living off direct deposits into her account from her late husband's estate. Robuscus48 said, similarly, there has been a point in the 1920s where radium products such as pottery, bowls, paints, and watches were sold because they glow in the dark. This was nearly 60 years after Marie Curie died from radiation poisoning after literally discovering and experimenting with radium and polonium. People say that marketing has become predatory and dangerous recently, but it's been that way for centuries, from the old days when mercury was used in makeup and hat making, when various faulty firearms were mass-produced during the World Wars, and when pesticides contained DT and started causing birds and other animals to drop dead due to bioaccumulation. This kind of stuff has been known to be harmful for years at the points when they became products, and it's only been recently due to the internet that consumers have had ways to figure out harmful products on their own terms and collectively boycott them. Of course, stuff like essential oils, prescription drugs, and trends still exist that pander to specific groups and evade payoff safety boards, but at least the vast majority of products have safety measures in place to reduce the chances of consumer harm. Beepborpimajorp said. The death of Sylvia Likens. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/murder_of_Sylvia_Likens. I would strongly recommend avoiding reading it if you're faint-hearted. The gist is that her parents left her, and her sister, with another family to take care of them. That other family tortured Sylvia in increasingly heinous ways, including getting the boyfriends of 2 of the daughters to torture her by doing things like judo, throwing her into concrete, etc. There's a lot. It's an example of the depths of human depravity. The worst part is that her murderers were found guilty, but all of them got shortened sentences or were released on parole. The main culprit only served 14 years, and a couple of the ones involved only served 2 years. For everything they did to that girl. That's the punishment they received. Sun0F Heaven said. Don't read if faint of heart. I read her story a month ago, still gives me chills. What they did to her was unforgivable. They lacerated her, forced her to masturbate with a glass bottle in front of the entire family naked, used a hot metal rod to burn the words "I am a prostitute and am proud of it" on her chest below her breasts. They couldn't properly burn the last words, so they used some bolts or something. Ugh. Just writing this is going to give me nightmares. The reason they tortured her was because the family's mother was in the lows of life and saw how perfect Sylvia's life was. She got jealous and used random reasons to do these things to her. Sylvia jokingly said she slept with her boyfriend, so I'm going to stop myself. Goodbye. Glucosa86 said. Elderly man was his wife's caretaker. She had dementia but is relatively functional, can still drive, etc., although she sometimes gets confused about where she's going. Kids live out of town and rotate calling every week. They finally realize no one has actually talked to Dad in months. It's just Mom answering the phone, who always says he's at the store or taking a nap or in the shower. They call someone to go check on Dad. Dad had presumably died in his sleep many weeks, or months, ago, and Mom just kept living life unaware, including sleeping in the same bed as his body every night. It was so bad the interior of the windows were solid black with flies and they had to use shovels to scoop his liquid remains off the bed and into a plastic bin as best they could. Macwina90 said. From personal experience. Buddy of mine and I were hanging at his family condo up in the Ozarks. Throughout the day, we kept hearing bumps, footsteps, and scratching up in the attic. We thought it was rodents, so we checked it out. No rodents. Instead, we found a disheveled elderly woman up there. Turns out 2 days before we arrived, our next door neighbor locked his wife in his attic. She managed to tear and claw through to her attic, and she couldn't have been any younger than 70. How she did that, and without food or water, was something incredible, but my God, that was a horrifying sight to see in one's attic. Not to mention her husband's actions. Circus Seal said. Mario Uriast. Dumb kid who was jailed for shoplifting. Was sent to the New Mexico State Penitentiary in 1980. He was originally placed in a cell block housing violent criminals where he was gang raped by 7 inmates. Mario had filed a lawsuit against his rapists, so prison officials have housed him in protective custody for his own protection. Then a huge riot occurred and a lot of the rioting prisoners took the opportunity to settle scores. Uriast was one of the targets for revenge. His body was found hanged, with his throat cut and his dismembered genitals stuffed into his mouth. That was one of the most violent uprisings in US penal history. More info here if interested. Cool Crush Killa said my grandmother and uncle on my mother's side were murdered, back in the 80s. I was 3 years old when it happened. There was a movie made about it too, called Sleep Murder. https://www.imdb.com/title/tt0371230/ The murderer is not related to us. The story is that they were out drinking, having a good time, and went home in the same cab to drink some more. Guy gets blackout drunk and stabs them to death. I remember my mother telling me when I was 3 years old, we went to go visit them. She let me try to open the door, and our CMP member came running and screaming to not to open the door. Green Yoshi 89 said. In 1985 there was a huge earthquake, 8.1, in Mexico City. My aunt, who has lived there all her life, was working when it happened. Luckily she and others were able to get out of the building. She mentioned a close friend of her told her she forgot her bag and she had to return for it. The building collapsed short after and she never saw her friend again. Also, a few years ago I was working in a hotel in Cancun. Made some great friends there, mostly chefs and waiters. One of the chefs was 35, and he told me they offered him the chance to work for the hotel in Japan, but he refused. When I asked him why, he told me that those ideas are for younger people. He didn't want to have the stress of learning a new language, being away from his family and starting from zero all over in a country so far from home. A year later, we both were not longer working in Cancun, but we kept talking every now and then. His final message was him saying Merry Christmas to me. A few months later, all the waiters I had on FB started sharing his pic. He was kidnapped and to this day no one knows anything about him. I can only imagine that if these two people would have taken a different choice, they would still be alive. Upinmaher said. A girl went to a party. Took a pill. Met a guy there, he was also on drugs. They had fun and decided to leave together to her place. So far so good. When she woke up in the morning, she immediately noticed that he had pooped into his underpants. She did not want to make him feel embarrassed, so she came up with something. Her plan was to go to the store to get some breakfast and call him when she got there to ask him what he wants. Then he would notice what happened and would have time to clean himself up. So that's what she did. But when she got to the store, he did not pick up his phone. So she thought, oh shit, his phone must be on silent. She grabbed some breakfast and returned to her home to wake him up. But when she tried to wake him, she realized that he did not shit himself in his sleep. He died. When you're dead, your bowel empty. Yes, she woke up next to a fucking dead body in her bed. I don't know her personally, but from what I heard, it fucked her up pretty bad. Demir said. My dad and uncle were part of a small coastal town's defense force in Lebanon in the late 1970s when the civil war was on the brink of breaking out. Fighting broke out and the skirmishes that were taking place evolved into an all-out assault on the town. On one of the last nights before the massacre took place, invading forces killed my grandfather, one of my uncles and his entire family, 3 children and his pregnant wife. My dad was called to the house in the morning when the fighting subsided. He had to help carry his family and load their bodies in the back of a truck where they took them to the local cemetery for a quick funeral service before they fled the town. He said when they got down to the beach and were waiting for boats to load up the refugees and take them to safety, they looked back and saw the entire town with smoke billowing up from it. It was like a horror story for me to find out about it. I've never asked my father how he has dealt with it. But after so many years he moved back to that coastal village just south of Beirut and he loves it with all his heart. The madman Andre said. 8 years ago when I was in Afghanistan, I got the chance to watch combat footage. A lot of it was your typical flare combat stuff, but one video stood out. It was bodycam footage, taken by I think 10th Mountain. It was a clip of a Taliban insurgent who had been raked by 25mm cannon fire from a Bradley, and had been quite literally cut in half at the waist. The top half was literally dragging itself toward the soldiers and the cameraman, with about 10 feet of entrails dragging behind it. Basically like a headcrab zombie from Half-Life 2 that got saw-bladed and was still going. It's been almost a decade, but I still remember the gleam of the madness in the guy's eyes. It was explained to me that the Taliban fighters often took an overdose level of narcotics before going into battle to give themselves an advantage, and the poor bastard probably didn't realize he just died. He wanted to kill Americans so badly he was willing to drag his legless and waistless torso toward them just to get a chance to, I don't know, nip in their shins or something. Every so often I used to replay HL2, but I can't anymore. I see a headcrab zombie and I think about that video. Exclusively said. Edit. Realized I'm actually thinking of Kitty Genovese. I watched a documentary about that. Apparently her younger brother was so heartbroken to learn that 30+ people had witnessed her attack without helping that he decided to join the military. He was injured while serving and paralyzed from the waist down. Years later, when he was an old man, it came out that the reporter who wrote that article had fabricated the whole thing. Several people had tried to help her, shouting from their windows for her attacker to go away as they saw him chasing her in the streets and forcing him to back off several times. The only person who had witnessed her attack without trying to help was, unfortunately, the last person to see her alive when her murderer finally cornered her in the lobby of an apartment building. Lose your sister for a coward and your legs for a lie. Retrosonic82 said. Fred and Rose West. Both had shitty childhoods. Fred had a sexual relationship with his mom and his dad, a farmer, taught him bestiality. He sexually abused young girls and when he was arrested, was really blasé about it because he thought everybody did it. He didn't stop. He eventually murdered several young women and buried them under his patio. He's been suspected of being responsible for the disappearance of other women. His wife had an equally disgusting childhood. She had a sexual relationship with her dad and sexually abused her brother on a regular basis. When she met Fred, he became a pimp of sorts to her because he loved watching her with other men. When her dad found out, he started paying her for sex too. She and Fred physically and sexually abused many women and their own children, again, both believing it was perfectly normal behavior, but somehow still managed to escape social services and would dodge suspicion by taking their kids to different hospitals when they were beaten to the point of injury. They went decades dodging suspicion and getting away with their crimes. They slipped through the net on several occasions when they could have easily been stopped, which is probably the most disturbing thing about this. He hung himself before he could be sentenced. She was given several life sentences and is still alive. She's never admitted to anything. Aggravating Accident 2 said. I had to move my dad's body from one graveyard to another one. On the surface that sounds bad. In reality, the graveyard where he was buried was abandoned by the church and county. My relatives moved other family members' graves to another site and I just had to approve and pay for the company they hired to dig up and move my dad at the same time they moved my grandparents and aunt and uncle. But it felt horrific having to deal with the decision. I made sure my will specifies cremation and ash scattering so that nobody will ever have to do that for me. Zelausidio Funny 895 said. A little boy, 9 years old Ruin, was a child of divorced parents. He was autistic. His mother got extremely anti-men. She got a partner and both of them tortured the boy. His stepsister thankfully didn't suffer anything. His father tried to get custody, got it, but his mother and her partner, the mother of the stepsister, relocated very often, so they couldn't be found. 2 years before his death, his mother and her partner cut his penis and testicles off to try to making him a girl, without anesthesia. His life was hell. He wasn't brought to health service for the rest of his short life. In 2019, they stabbed the boy 12 times when he was sleeping. He woke up, got in his knees and was stabbed 11 times more. It has been said in some websites that when they decapitated the boy, he was still alive. After, they dismembered his little body and tried to dispose of his body by grilling him. They tried to gouge his eyes and they ripped his little face off. When they couldn't dispose, they put his body into backpacks in an abandoned site. What was their reason? He remembered the mother of his father. They didn't eat the boys, but said the smell of the grill was very good. It is such a depraved case. I am against the death penalty, but a case such this one really tests this opinion. They were convicted, but this case is literal hell for the boy. https://www.google.com/m//9-year-old-son-in-dash-year-old-son-in-barbecue-c-1661644.amp. Primal Scream said. I was in 5th or 6th grade and the high school's kids rode the same school bus as the grade school. There were these two HS boys watching me the entire ride home, pointing and whispering. They lived in the same neighborhood so they got off at the same stop but they lived the opposite direction. So when I got off the bus I started walking fast and they came off the bus at a run, so I started running home. I was a latchkey kid so I was running to an empty place. I beat them to my house because it was a short distance, and I had a head start. Once I was inside with the door locked they started banging on the doors and windows and they were looking in all the windows trying to see me. I was hiding under a table. After that I started riding a different bus to my grandmother's house after that until we moved a year later. I was fucking terrified. Urban Lulu said. This didn't happen to me, so I don't have many details but a bit of background detail. Around the early summer of 2018, I went to a football game with two friends I made through my mom. I helped at her school. and got to know these women during my time there, so they were a bit older than me, but one of them just recently switched schools within her job and was working as a grief counselor at the new school. As she was telling us about her new job, out of nowhere, she drops a huge bomb saying the school's beloved custodian, I believe it was the custodian, committed a murder-suicide. He killed his wife, and then killed himself. This happened shortly after she started working at this job, like she had only been there for maybe 3 months maximum. So my friend, brand new to this school, is now having to not only grieve for herself because she knew him prior to the job, but now she has to help the whole school grieve and understand what the hell just happened. I don't think it was ever released in the news due to privacy reasons for the family. Nancy Drew Wannabe said, the murder-suicide of Addie Hall and Zach Bowen, a young couple living in New Orleans, who had gained fame for braving Hurricane Katrina together and finding love in the storm. Zach and Addie's relationship started out idyllic, but in the aftermath of the hurricane, when the honeymoon was over and reality set in, it fell apart. Both Zach and Addie struggled with mental illness and addiction. Zach especially suffered from PTSD, a result of having served in Iraq. Their relationship became abusive. Things came to a head in October 2006, when Zach strangled Addie, violated her dead body, and dismembered it in their bathtub over a period of days. He cooked her limbs in the oven and her head in a pot on top of the stove, and stored her torso in the fridge. It's believed his intention was to cannibalize her body as a means of disposing of it. He continued to go to work each day like normal. 2 weeks after the murder, when the reality of what he'd done set in, Zach jumped to his death from the roof of a hotel. His suicide note led the police to he and Addie's Rampart Street apartment, which sat above a voodoo temple. The police found the air conditioner on full blast, and the words "look in the oven" spray painted on the wall, with an arrow pointing to the stove. They did, and discovered Addie's remains. The apartment is rumored to be haunted. Paranormal Lockdown did a terrifying episode where they investigated it. The landlord, as of when the episode was filmed, had not replaced the stove, fridge, or bathtub. No one said. There is this boy I was friends with when I was growing up in India, my grandma's farmhand's son. Heard a few years ago that he got married and his wife was pregnant. One day my mom called me and told me that the wife and husband fought and the wife, who was 8 months pregnant, doused herself in kerosene and set it on fire. She suffered severe burns but survived, only for a couple of days. The baby would not stop writhing the whole time. I heard he remarried after a year. Metabik said, I'll never be able to get Sean Doyle's death out of my head and it still haunts me. Doyle was fell down an open manhole that was venting steam from a leak in the main line. He was steamed alive and did not die instantly. First responders were unable to rescue him and had to stand around listening to him scream while he died slowly. His outer layer of skin had peeled off. Because being steamed to death doesn't kill your nerve endings like being burned to death, Doyle felt everything until he died. Dr. Judy Melinek was the New York City medical examiner and she wrote, around Christmas 2002, bartender Doyle went out drinking with pal Michael Wright and Wright's girlfriend. As they all walked home, Wright thought Doyle was hitting on his girlfriend, and witnesses later told cops they saw a man getting the ST beat out of him. He was heard screaming, "No, don't break my legs." And another witness said he saw someone throw Doyle down an open manhole. The drop was 18 feet. At the bottom was a pool of boiling water, from a broken main. Doyle didn't die instantly. In fact, as first responders arrived, he was standing below, reaching up and screaming for help. No paramedic or firefighter could climb down to help. It was, a Con Ed supervisor said, 300 degrees in the steam tunnel. 4 hours later, Sean Doyle's body was finally recovered. Its temperature was 125 degrees. The medical examiners thought it was likely way higher, but thermometers don't read any higher than that. Jealous Network 8852 said, when I was in college, a kid asked his friend to meet him in a motel near campus because he was contemplating suicide. When the friend got there, the kid was not suicidal, but confessed his love to the friend and said he got the room so they could have sex. The friend turned him down, said he wasn't gay and had no interest in him and went to leave. The kid snapped, killed the friend, dismembered his body and threw it in the hotel dumpster. Went back to campus like nothing happened. It didn't take long for the police to catch the kid, but the fact that he killed and dismembered his friend and so casually went back to campus was pretty fucked up. Jealous Network 8852 said. When I was in college, a kid asked his friend to meet him in a motel near campus because he was contemplating suicide. When the friend got there, the kid was not suicidal, but confessed his love to the friend and said he got the room so they could have sex. The friend turned him down, said he wasn't gay and had no interest in him and went to leave. The kid snapped, killed the friend, dismembered his body and threw it in the hotel dumpster. Went back to campus like nothing happened. It didn't take long for the police to catch the kid, but the fact that he killed and dismembered his friend and so casually went back to campus was pretty fucked up. Federico said. Mostro di Firenze, Italian for Florence Monster. He was a serial killer who typically murdered young couples in the countryside of Tuscany, proceeding to mutilate parts of the women's bodies, carrying them away with him. He acted sporadically and with a span of years between killings, making it difficult getting caught, and he operated in very remote areas that are far from each other. The thing that is remarkable about it, even if the murders themselves aren't as horrendous and terrible as others, is the whole social and political drama he caused in Italy in the mid-80s. A process full of comedy, which is difficult to elaborate in a simple way. His identity is still practically unknown today. Mind Like a Minefield said. One of my good friends was kidnapped, sexually assaulted and murdered by her uncle when we were in 5th grade. As a longtime true crime junkie, I've heard some pretty horrific cases, but it was really surreal experiencing something you see on the news in real life. The case was even featured on an episode of the FBI Files. The day of her disappearance was easy to remember because we went on a field trip to the aquarium and our groups joined together for lunch outside as our moms were both chaperones. My last memory of her was of her hysterically laughing at me because she was the first to notice I put my elbow right into my chocolate pudding cup while wearing a long-sleeved white tee, then just jumped sitting in the library while the detective told all of us 10-year-olds they didn't think someone was randomly snatching kids off of the street. It pops back into my head when stuff about Versace Andrew Cunanan comes up, as he killed Lee Migelin in Chicago. We're from the suburbs, right before my friend went missing. For months I knew when the Cunanan Manhunt segment aired, they'd discuss Lee, then my friend. JCD 1974 said. This was posted on Art Today Learned yesterday. Blanche Monnier, often known in France as La Séquestrée de Poitiers, roughly, the confined woman of Poitiers, was a woman from Poitiers, Vienne, France, who was secretly kept locked in a small room by her aristocratic mother for 25 years. She was eventually found by police, then middle-aged and in an emaciated and filthy condition. According to officials, Monnier had not seen any sunlight for her entire captivity. Monnier was a French socialite from a well-respected, conservative bourgeoisie family in Poitiers of old noble origins. She was renowned for her physical beauty, and attracted many potential suitors for marriage. In 1874, at the age of 25, she desired to marry an older lawyer who was not to her mother Louise's liking. She argued that her daughter could not marry a penniless lawyer. Her disapproving mother, angered by her daughter's defiance, locked her in a tiny, dark room in the attic of their home, where she kept her secluded for 25 years. Louise Monnier and her brother Marcel continued on with their daily lives, pretending to mourn Blanche's disappearance. None of her friends knew where she was, and the lawyer who she wished to marry died unexpectedly in 1885. https://en.wikipedia.org/wiki/Blanche_Monnier. Zaradama Tharofkin said. When I was very young, 5 or 6, I decided to be a big girl and locked the bathroom door for the first time while showering. I turned on the tap water from the tub faucet, let it heat up and got in. Then I flipped the water from the tub to the shower. Sadly, I was in the bathroom we rarely used for bathing and unbeknownst to me, an ant colony had nested in the shower head, so instead of water coming out, it was just ants. Of course I screamed and was freaking out. And of course, because I had locked the door, no one could help me. Eventually my clever older sister picked the lock on the doorknob and they got me out. I have repressed most of what happened, but my sister recalls there being a full-on pile of ants on my head. I just remember my dad wrapping me in a towel and running me to the other shower to get them off of me. Needless to say, I do not like ants now, and I always let the shower head run for a bit before getting in. I just discovered we have carpenter ants in the walls of our rental. I can hear them in the walls at night and it keeps me up. Did you know carpenter ants make little swishing noises to communicate? Shiver. Random Messages said. A cult called Heaven's Gate led by a man named Marshall Whiteapple. It was around from 1974 to 1997. He claimed that aliens were going to come in rocket ship and time those who deserved to heaven. He claimed to get into heaven you had to wear black Nikes, men had to be castrated, and eventually in 1997 they rented out a campsite, drank poison diluted with cyanide, put garbage bags over their heads, and the cult of hundreds each lay down in a bed and died. Men, women, children, all manipulated by this man. Wheel N.S. Nibenselli said. Guy in his early 20s was convinced he was a 300-year-old werewolf. Oh, and he was dating a 12-year-old girl. Naturally her parents didn't like that, so they tried to put a stop to it. The girl and her boyfriend decided to kill her parents and 8-year-old brother. They then ran away together. After they got caught, he proposed to her while in jail, or while being transported, I can't remember, and she said yes. He effectively confessed, almost to the point of being proud of it, to an undercover cop. The girl is now free, having served a prison sentence, and then was held in a psychiatric institution where she took university courses. The guy is currently still in jail. The only thing that would make it more horror movie is if she breaks him out of jail so they can go kill more people.